Would like to welcome you to our Planning Commission meeting today on May 28th, 2024. We'll start tonight by an invocation given by Commissioner Danielson, and then Commissioner Callis will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're grateful to be able to gather, and we're grateful for our community and our beautiful city. We're grateful for the good people here, and we pray that things will go well tonight, that things can go smoothly, and that we can have a good understanding of what it is we should be doing. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Will everyone please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
We'll begin with an audible roll call of the commissioners. Sharon Call.
Here.
Mike Marchbanks.
Here.
Rob Callis.
Here.
Steve Johnson. Here. Scott Thompson.
Here.
Jared Showers.
Here.
Karen Danielson.
Here.
The next item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting on May 14th. The commissioners have received these minutes beforehand and have had a chance to review them. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes?
No.
No, I don't think so.
I didn't see anything. Okay, do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay, the next item on our agenda is a time for public comment. This is a time for anybody that's here that would like to address the commission on an item that's not on the agenda. Is there anybody here for that purpose? Okay, not seeing any, we'll move on to item number 4 on our agenda. This item was continued from a previous meeting, and I also believe that the public hearing was continued. So we will first have staff present additional information, and then we'll open the public hearing at that point. So this is item 4 for an ordinance amendment for a market farm. So we'll turn the time over to staff.
Thank you, Commissioners. Appreciate being here with you this evening. So last time we saw this, it was April 23rd, a little over a month ago. And so last time we had a number of discussion items, and I've listed those on the front page of your staff report there under this item, and I wanted to go through each one of those. So let's see. So Appendix A, we made the note that these would be a conditional use permit in the in the residential R120 zone only. And so if this ordinance passes the Planning Commission and City Council, then the owners would come back for a conditional use permit at a later date. Letter C was the next one. The discussion was that the setbacks for any permanent building should be the same as the R120 zone. So we added letter C that says setbacks for all permanent structures shall meet the single-family residential R120 requirements found in Title 17.44. We then also talked about hours of operation, that there was probably some difference between the owners working on the farm and any of their farm help that needed to get there earlier or later. So the way this now reads is the market farm should not be open to the public before 7 a.m. or after 9 p.m. Operation and care of the farm may occur outside of these hour restrictions.
In your summary, I think that's worded a little incorrect, if that's important or not.
It might be, yes. Okay. Let me read what I got and see. Yeah, I summarized it just different in my report. The next was regarding employees. So with this, you kind of said, come back with with your recommendation. The home occupation ordinance, if we wanted to compare those, says you can have one employee or one equivalent part-time employee equivalent to a full-time employee as a part-time. And so what I added here was 2 employees, and we should have that discussion, but it says the business may have up to 2 employees, and I've got to fix that, what's in the parentheses there. Employees are part-time equivalent or to 2 employees who do not live in the dwelling unit. Only 2 non-resident employees or part-time equivalent shall work at the market farm at any given time. So this allows 2 employees or equivalent to 2 employees. Letter H.
Mike, can I just ask a question on that? So would it allow them to have 4 at one time if they were all part-time for a busy market? Okay.
Yes,
It's just that they have to be classified as part-time.
that's correct.
Okay.
Letter H, and so we wanted to allow the owners to sell some of their products on site. So the example was, well, what about flower pots or, things that are made on site, or maybe the owner's selling some things that they're reselling. And so letter H says, the market farm owners who reside at the residence may sell associated agricultural items. The inventory of such items shall be stored indoors. Vendors shall not be allowed to set up permanent or temporary sales areas. Letter A, we talked about the size of the market farm. So this says the maximum size for any market farm is 2 acres. The 2-acre requirement includes the legal on-site owner-occupied residence. So let's say they've got a half-acre lot, they can have 1.5 acres into the market farm. And then I think lastly, we talked about the little seasonal farm stand. So when it's not in season, it says the sales stand shall be of a non-permanent structure and shall be removed behind the front single-family setback of the R120 zone following the agricultural growing season. And then letter C, the last one is letter C. Instead of having specific things like, hey, you got to meet building code, you got to meet ADA requirements, ADA are part of the building code, I just shortened it to say all buildings shall meet building code requirements. And so that will cover any building code requirements such as, allowing the public into a structure or a restroom requirement or ADA to pathway to the building. And so those are things that the Butlers or a future property owner that wants to do similar would need to work those things out with the building department. So those were the summaries that I had from the last meeting. So I'd be glad to discuss any of those items if you have any questions.
Thank you. And Lindon City is the applicant, but this is for the Butler. So if you do want to come up and.
Butlers are the applicant.
Okay, it just lists Lindon City as the applicant on the.
Sorry,
But if the Butlers are the applicant, I apologize, I didn't invite you up front first, but you're welcome to come sit up front and
That was my mistake on the agenda,
Okay.
sorry.
so that you can be part of this with us. Thank you. Commission, any questions for staff or the applicants regarding these changes, or?
Are these changes okay with the applicant?
I think by and large there, I think we have 2 areas of just where we'd like to collaborate a little bit and get some advice, but generally really like the changes in the direction it's headed.
And they have a presentation, if you want me to pull that up now, or?
Sure, I think the 2 areas where we just wanted to kind of maybe double click down and make sure we were good with what it is or maybe request some changes is 1C and then 2C. So 1C is the one about setbacks, and we just did a little bit of research on setbacks. We were looking at some of the other market farms in the area, and while Michael's pulling up the presentation, this is just 3 slides here on Snook Farm in Pleasant Grove. This is a picture, so they're in a residential area, so you've got homes behind it, homes to the east, homes to the west, and they built a small market kind of shop where they sell some of the products and things that they build there, and then they've got this big cut flower garden off to the left. we really like this, and as you kind of cycle through, Michael, maybe you can go to the second and third one here. That's kind of what it looks like just as you're coming at it driving west. And then this is just a Google image showing the setback they've got from the edge of the sidewalk to the front porch is 20 feet. And just wanted to get a sense from Planning Commission if something like this would be possible where we are, or if there's concern with kind of a 20-foot setback and reason behind 30, because we really like how this looks and feel like it's consistent with some of the other farm markets in the area.
That's not a corner lot, is it? That's,
No,
I'm concerned that it's in a residential area, and the residential area setbacks are X. If it wasn't in a residential area, we might be able to be flexible, but I think we don't want to set a precedent. We want somebody come back to us going, well, you let them build in 20 feet, we want to build our house 20 feet.
gotcha.
So we sort of have to look long down the road at what this might trigger.
or the purpose of, you know, maybe repurposing that building into something else in the future when you're gone.
Yeah,
Now we've got something that's 20 feet from the road. That could be, you could add on to it as a residence or something like that. That would be my concern.
I guess my question real quick, Mike, and I don't know if you know, but what is the residential setback in Pleasant Grove?
I can look it up real quick if you.
I'm just wondering if their setback is
maybe it is
20,
20.
which ours is 30, you know, so that, I think that might be a difference there, why that one is allowed. I don't know, but that would be a question I would have. Because
Not
we
when
are
we-
trying to keep that same feel,
yeah.
not so much, you know, like it says, if it is repurposed, it is a concern that we have that now all of a sudden, someone has a shed that's now
Yeah.
closer to the road than it should be, and those types of things, I think.
I think it's honestly fine with us. This one wasn't, this was more just out of curiosity than trying to understand how
Like
the thought behind it.
The current garage that is there is at the 30, I think 32.
Yeah.
So it's within that, but, I mean, we were just curious.
Yeah.
Just a question for you. Don't you have kind of a shed and area?
That's what she was talking about,
over
yeah,
to
it's
the
kind of
side,
an old garage
yeah.
that's been repurposed
You,
into.
you already have that on site, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I like what you're doing.
Yeah,
It
thanks.
looks really fun and beautiful, and I have seen, I haven't stopped, but I've seen when you've had little fairs or markets going on there.
Could you put something up that's not temporary, a nice shed within that 20 feet?
Well, I think that's
think you
accounted
can.
for in two,
So,
let's see, what was it?
but if you're putting in a foundation, yeah, I would want to keep that 30-foot setback.
Yeah, if it accounts for seasonal stand, I think we're fine with the 30-foot setback. Like I said, it's more just curiosity, like we don't have any
Right.
plans right now to build anything, we just
Yeah.
really curious on the thoughts behind it, and I think we understand it better now.
One of the things that one of my concerns, and this is on a different thing, is your parking in
Oh,
front. Because in this ordinance, it says that you can't park in front of other residents. You don't want your customers or whoever's coming. And when I've gone by, sometimes that street is really, there's a lot of cars for quite a
I don't think
distance.
it's from us, though.
Yeah, there might have, I mean, we've had one event that we just kind of tried last fall, like a little community gathering.
Yeah,
And I think that's something that we kind of trialed, but would not be accounted for in this, so it's not something we'd do
Okay.
again. So most of
Okay.
our things contemplated would fit within the parking
you
restrictions
could keep the parking
pretty easily.
either on your lot or
Yeah.
in front
That
of
would
your residence.
Totally be the intent.
Okay, yeah.
And most weeks, I think, like we said, in the summertime, I mean, trying to think so far this year, like maybe one or two events with 4 or 5 cars at any given time is kind of the,
And that's
Yeah.
great.
and that's
yeah.
kind of more consistent with how
Yeah.
we're planning on using it going forward.
I probably saw the fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were
It seemed
testing.
like you had several vendors there beside yourself,
yeah.
and so that attracted.
Which also is prohibited in the way the ordinance is written, and
Yeah.
we're totally fine with that. It's not something we're
Okay.
planning on doing.
Okay. No, that's great.
Just more about flower production, agriculture, and then small scale, kind of flower design classes and that type of stuff.
Oh, that's fun. I've got to check it out and be there.
Yeah. All right, okay, so this is, the big one for us is 2C. Maybe you go to the next slide, Michael. Like, this is really about kind of our concerns about the restroom and ADA requirements specifically, and these are kind of 2 in 1, but I had a chance to talk with Bryce McConkey today. about really what would be required here and spent, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes talking with him. And at the end of the call, he's like, Brian, this is a gray area. Like, he did not have strong guidance for us on what is required or not required. And he kind of bounced back and forth on the conversation with us about, well, it's commercial, but it's also not commercial. Like, it's more like home occupancy in many ways, like small scale in a residential neighborhood. But because there's commercial activity, we kind of flip-flop back and forth. And so I tried to just kind of create a chart where we could look at the options here and where Sunnyside and then this kind of idea of a market farm fits kind of in kind of what I call no man's land between how the code is currently written for what I call formal commercial operations for like somebody that has a storefront or a grocery store and keeps set business hours that's open to the public versus a home occupancy like swimming lessons, horse riding therapy, so forth, that is really by appointment or seasonal and private access only, like by appointment with specific people. Like the market farm in many ways feels more like home occupancy, although it doesn't fit cleanly into that code, because on an average week we might be open only for a couple of hours, and it would be on for kind of private events. And so it's not really open to the public. And so the question is around, what type of restroom facilities are required for something like this. And so we did some research, got some quotes on what it would cost to, retrofit existing buildings and capabilities with a kind of a formal ADA compliant restroom. And it came in somewhere around $70,000, which is kind of 10x our annual revenue. And then the other option that was recommended that we looked into was doing kind of a seasonal porta potty rent. And so we called 2 different places that rent those out, and it's $528 a month, which is just over 30% of our annual revenue. So in both these cases, providing restroom facilities on site for this type of operation is really cost prohibitive, and just, I guess wanted to kind of talk through this specific requirement or non-requirement, because like I said, Bryce didn't necessarily come out and say, hey, like this provision in 2C saying that all buildings shall meet building code requirements may not stipulate that we should or should not. It's really broad language that's kind of up for interpretation. And so I guess we wanted to get kind of formal guidance and hoping that, I think what we'd love to see is like, hey, to the extent that we construct formal restroom facilities on premises, we'll make sure to make them ADA compliant, but requiring restroom facilities is really hurts the business model materially.
So yeah, that was one of my questions, is the way it was rewritten. Is it required for them to build a building, or are they fine with that one? And so I don't know what your interpretation is that.
So my interpretation is that I wrote it broadly enough that gives us a chance to study this before they apply for their conditional use permit and before we approve a business license. And so, to Bryce's defense, he was up at the temple doing an inspection. He didn't have code books in front of him. He was, he was probably waffling back and forth because he doesn't have all the history of this either. So, that was my thing. This is a commercial use. It's going to require a conditional use permit. And so we need to study a little bit more with the Butlers and the building codes. What if this requires a bathroom, what type we could approve or evaluate. So I wrote this broad enough to give us a chance to evaluate this further before we come for some finalized approvals with the conditional use permit.
I think when it comes to ADA stuff, it's very difficult because there's people out there who are gonna come to your facility and who will come in intentionally to see if you comply. And they wanna turn around and sue you, and then they're gonna wanna turn around and sue us for allowing this conditional use that's not compliant with ADA requirements. So it's really sort of, there's people out there that's their whole livelihood is to go out and find places that are not compliant so that they can sue.
What was really interesting when we did research on this is that like having restroom facilities is not a requirement of ADA. the requirement of ADA is if you have restroom facilities and it's open to the public, then they would have to be ADA compliant. And so it's almost like if we don't have restroom facilities, then we don't have to.
We're not giving preference to either.
Yeah, does that make sense? And then secondarily, we're not open to the public in the sense, like, I know we talked about doing some of the kind of market fairs or kind of vendor things where we'd have multiple vendors. We actually wrote that into this, that's prohibited. So we're not going to open the farm up to the public. It's all gonna be by private appointment only.
That technically is still open to the public. Even if they're invited to come, you've opened it up to the public.
So,
But it's, so can you explain again the difference with somebody who's doing piano lessons, or those are by appointment only,
Or swimming lessons.
you know, too, or music or art lessons or something, where like me teaching a floral design class is different?
Why they're not, because they're not required to have ADA compliant restrooms, right?
No,
Is that
and
correct?
we're not getting into this ordinance about what's required for ADA. That's a more specific question that, to meet with the building official about. And so, the difference is, we're opening up a, yes, there's a residence there on the property, or will be with any of these uses, but you're opening it up for more of a commercial use. I think, yes, or in our previous meeting we had, you didn't mention that it was just open, it was just invitation only. You talked about that it was more open for the public. I don't think it matters whether it's by invitation or just if you're open from 7 to 9. I mean, if it's only open from 7 to 9, then that's open for the public. If it's only up by invitation only, then we write something different in the ordinance that it can only be, maybe by invitation only or something during specific hours.
How would that affect the restroom requirement then?
I don't know how it affects. That's why I'm saying we have something broad in here that says they've got to meet building code. They need a business license. Bryce and they need a conditional use permit. So Bryce will evaluate those things prior to us, the planning commission, reviewing the conditional use permit and the business license.
so if it was deemed like a home occupation, is my understanding a home occupation, they can just use the bathroom in the home. It doesn't have to be ADA compliant or whatever. Am I correct in that?
Yes, there's only two types of businesses that we allow. So what the home occupation ordinance says, that everything has to be indoors, has to be inside of a home or a portion of an accessory building. The only other two that we allow outside of that is swimming lessons and that animal assisted therapy that we allowed for over here, that property owner on, on the backside of the hollow there.
So that's the clarification I want. So home occupation, if it's inside the home, they're exempt from that requirement as far as ADA, if they meet the home occupation requirements. This is where we're in that gray area between, because it's outside the home. Okay.
But we do have precedent for home occupation use outside the home, like in the case of equestrian lessons or animal therapy or swimming lessons that take place outside of the physical home structure where accessible facilities aren't required.
You keep saying accessible though.
Or any sort of restroom other than what's in the home. And
I haven't seen very many businesses that don't have a restroom available.
I think we'd be.
Do you really think that you can operate without the bathroom?
Even a soccer team can't do it without a bathroom. For club soccer, you have to have a bathroom provided, right? Like, it's just.
And I don't mind making our like home restroom available, kind of like the home occupancy users would. And I think given that like we've actually written into this that the home is part of the market farm, I would hope that's reasonable, because it does have such a, when I talked to Bryce about it, he's like, his deal or kind of verbiage that he used with me was, if it is unreasonable from a financial perspective, we would look at making exceptions. And I think that's where we kind of want to circle on this, is it like the feasibility of this endeavor if required to construct restroom facilities, it makes it really difficult.
On your main floor of your home, do you have like a half bath or something that is easy for people to access? I don't know if that makes.
Right by everything.
Well, it's in our residence, and the market, the market is around. I mean, I had a 78-year-old woman who helped me out weeding and deadheading last year, and she used my bathroom when she needed to. But generally, I mean, this is where we're a little bit different from commercial, is that we're not open 7 to 9 for the general public to stop by any time. I'm harvesting flowers or I'm selling flowers, but I have my little cart set out on Saturday mornings and people drive by, pick up their flowers and leave. Nobody's staying on the property. Or I'll have like maybe a class here or a class there. They're completely random and it's like an hour or 2-hour event and then we're done. So it's not like we have these set business hours where commercialism you have like a storefront or a restaurant or a soccer club where it's in continual use and you have families coming and children and everybody in tow. It's so much different where it is more like the home occupancy where people just.
Now, Snook Farms, they have restrooms.
They do not in their marketplace. Their market with the pictures that you've seen there is just a market. It's 4 walls.
Well.
But they do in the, yes, they do.
If you do a private
Private event.
class, yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I think we're in the weeds on this. This is not something, unless you're going to write in there that a bathroom's not required, which I don't think you should.
No.
I think let us work with the Butlers and figure this out before it comes back to you for a conditional use permit and the city issues a business license.
My concern is though, this is a new zone, right, that we're creating, and leaving it, in my experience, leaving it so vague and open, leaves it available to interpretation different ways with different properties. And so I guess that's, if we're struggling with this, there's probably a reason we're struggling with it. And I worry that applicant 3, 4, or 5 then is taking that vagueness and going maybe a direction we don't want to. And that's my only concern with that.
But I'm not sure
It
how.
requires it.
No, it just says you meet building code requirements.
Right, but that's a building code requirement.
Well, and the building code has different scenarios and, things like that. And so, maybe you want to table this again, but we can have the building official come talk about some of these requirements. But he has specific building codes that he would follow in making a determination.
But if they don't build a building, I guess we're saying in this zone, there's no requirement for a bathroom. I mean, we're not writing that there's any requirement for a bathroom. So
No, but for us to issue a business license, we will review those things.
right, so that might be separate
Restrooms
from the zone.
that requires any commercial business. We're always looking at restrooms, we're looking at ADA access before we issue a business license. And so Bryce would look at those things, he'd look at the type of use, he would look at, there is financial things in there. Well, he would look at all those things before making a determination.
So as far as the code that we're writing is concerned, we're covered by saying it has to comply. That basically covers it, and we leaves it up to you to work out any details.
And so will there be a separate, because the home occupancy isn't a zone thing, that's a separate ordinance that regulates a home occupancy.
Yes,
So
and this
is just a zone, right? Or is this a?
This is a new ordinance to allow for market farms. It's not a home occupation.
It's not a zone, we're not rezoning it.
zone,
It's
We're not
just-
rezoning
R120.
anything. So,
You said you would work with the Butlers and with Bryce, on working that part of it out. Can we pass the ordinance tonight before those things are worked out, or do we have to wait for you to bring it back to us?
oh, you could make a recommendation to the city council and, you know, we can start working on those things, because they're gonna have to come back to you for a conditional use permit.
Right.
And before they apply for the conditional use permit, they'll want to work those things out with the city as well.
Yeah.
So we could go ahead with the ordinance tonight
Yes.
if that's the only thing that we need to work through.
That's correct.
Because if anything, we're being, by the wording here, we're being more restrictive and then leaving it to you to work out the details.
Let's say even if you were to strike that sentence, they must meet building code requirements, they're still gonna have to meet building code requirements
Right.
before we issue a business license.
No.
This is more giving someone a heads up that, hey, there's things you need to meet besides the zoning code that's written right here. Come in and talk to the building official.
Right,
Okay.
but I guess if we were, this is just me thinking out loud, and I can be convinced one way or another by my fellow commissioners and the staff, but if the whole idea is we're trying to figure out how to make this, this new thing work within the city, wouldn't we want some direction on this? I mean, the building code requirements are the building code requirements. If you're gonna build a bathroom, you're gonna have to make it compliant. But
We're not building a bathroom.
But if they're not building a bathroom, which we don't say, but wouldn't we want to spell out whether we think this type of operation should have a bathroom or not, as part of the ordinance? Before we pass it and go on, I guess that's my question, is that a debatable thing, is this type of operation, are we fine? Because the way it's written, if, let's say we go forward and we decide, okay, for the Butlers, they're small enough, we're not gonna require them to have a bathroom with the business. And I don't know how all that would work. Then an operation that really is open from 7 to 9, because that's what the ordinance says, and they have people coming and going. And then they use the same ordinance to say, well, we don't have to have a bathroom, because they didn't have to have a bathroom. That's my worry, leaving it out of something here without saying why or how, just opens us up for future possibilities of someone saying, well, they did this, and this is the ordinance they used.
Can I make a suggestion? Would it be possible to write something in a way that says, to the extent that the market farm is open more than X number of hours a week, we require restroom facilities, or?
That's getting really specific. I
don't think you'd want that.
That's just be too limiting and too flexible, too difficult to enforce. All of a sudden we see you exceeding that, now you have to have a bathroom.
Yeah, are there any other ways to get the specificity that?
I'm just wondering, are my fellow commissioners fine with making it just really kind of broad before we pass it, thinking about future ramifications if somebody else comes, and,
I'm fine with the way it's written and giving staff the flexibility to work it out, but I should voice the opinion, I just can't see any operation, even if you're only open for an hour a day, not being required to have a restroom.
Yeah.
That's part of
But
a
if-
commercial operation.
A restroom out in addition to our home restroom?
If you can get the home opened up and available, fine. You just gotta have facilities available. That's what makes it commercial.
Yeah, I don't think we're at all opposed to that.
That's something you can work out with staff.
Right. I guess,
In regards to that.
yeah, and if we're fine with them not having to build it, and that they can use the home occupancy type requirement to have a bathroom. I mean, I operated my accounting business out of my home for a long time before I got where I had more than one employee. They used one of the bathrooms, we made it so it was a double door, so when it was, we shut it in one way or the other, so it could be used both ways. I just don't know if that needs, just make sure that we have that.
From what Mike said, we can leave that in there, and then they can interpret that. And I guess I don't see too much danger in that, as long as there's an interpretation of what that means. And that's the reason why I asked the question, do they have a half bath on the main floor of their home that is accessible? To me, I feel like these types of businesses, you want them to succeed, and we don't want it to be so expensive for them to succeed that they can't.
But at the same time, if they can't afford it, then maybe they shouldn't be doing it.
Well, no, I don't
See,
agree with that.
well, I do, because to meet a commercial operation, you have to meet the standards. And to Scott's point, if you let people use your home restroom, that's fine, but if you've got
That's
steps
right.
going up to your home, you're like opening yourself up to a lawsuit.
But just in all respect, how come that same notion doesn't apply to home occupancy users that are sprinkled throughout the city, like that are teaching pool lessons or equestrian lessons that are using home restroom that's not accessible?
And Rob, for instance, when I operated my accounting firm and I had a lot of clients come, and the ramp was not ADA compliant, and there was a step into it,
Yeah.
and the bathroom wasn't,
And
because
times have
it met the requirements, but, so,
To Scott's point, we had 7 lawsuits this year
Yeah.
from this attorney that's traveling around looking for violations. His wife is
right,
in a wheelchair, and they're looking for violations, and then they sue you, and
right, but those are,
times have changed.
yeah,
Rob, when you say we, the city or your Woodbury?
Our business.
Yeah.
but those are commercial properties that require ADA. Mike, do you have something that you want?
That's, I think, what we've done here is we're trying to combine a residence living on site with a commercial operation.
Yeah,
And that's where it's kind of hard to mix the two a little
I'm
bit.
struggling with that.
And-
I am.
Well, we've allowed exceptions for swimming and whatever else. Can we not just allow an exception for those who are using their property under this ordinance to be able to use their home bathroom or not? Can we not just reference the two, and if their property qualifies and what their operation is doing qualifies under this market farm zone? I guess I'm not seeing the problem why we can't allow them to use the bathrooms like an accountant or.
And the
Like a
way the
home
code
occupation.
reads, they could provide their home restroom for use, and it doesn't need to be accessible. But if they do a certain amount of remodeling, then it has to become accessible. So you could get away with that.
And if there is some liability on the city, I don't know
I don't
if they
think it's
can.
on the city.
Well, as Scott mentioned, if there is, maybe as part of the conditional use is they absolve the city from any ADA non-compliant lawsuits or whatever.
So I guess my only thought there is, could we write in that, for those types of things, we're using the home occupation ordinance, reference that, for, that we consider this also a home occupation. I mean, because we're requiring the residents there. That's the only thing I'm wondering, just like, we did with the dance studio, it's a larger home occupation, but this is just a home occupation that we have an exception with a conditional use permit, that they can use more of their outside, just like we do swimming lessons or other things. They still fall under home occupations.
I mean, I certainly like that because it's a lot of effort for us to, go through the process of trying to build this kind of endeavor, go through, change the code. I'd hate to build the endeavor, change the code, and then get pointed back to, all right, go get your business license now, and have the planning commission or whatever say no for whatever reason. So I mean, I like the clarity coming out of this type of meeting of,
It wouldn't be the planning commission.
well, not
I'll give you
planning,
a hard- It would be the building code.
the building code,
It
yeah.
would be the building code down the road. I don't think any of us here would have allowed Wadley Farms or Walker Farms to say, yeah, do what you want, and yes, you can use the restroom in the house, which is right there as well.
Those commercial entities are nothing like
They're much
this
bigger,
type of
yes,
thing.
Very, very
absolutely,
different.
but
It's a total
You know,
different
it's
classification.
totally different,
I don't feel comfortable writing something right now. I'd want to bring it back to you, or you do it with a condition, move this forward with a condition that staff evaluate that, and see if the council wants to add that to the code.
We, okay. Maybe this would be a good time. We do have public here, so maybe if we open the public hearing, we can hear from our public that wants to speak. So is there a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to open a public hearing.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion carries. Okay. So if you want to come up and state your name, and
You can raise your hand from your seat if you want.
I don't, Lincoln Jacobs, I don't struggle with it like you do, Steve. I like it worded just like what Mike has put here. Because as we go through the city council and we change ordinances all the time, I don't wanna have to go back to every single zone and change every single little teeny tiny piece, right? If it meets building code, then it meets building code. And as building code changes, this is just gonna fall underneath, right? If it's built beforehand, it'll pass until you go make modifications, et cetera.
and
I
I like the wording. I'm just saying the wording does not address the issue of a bathroom at all. And that's my concern is that if the applicants have asked that to be addressed so that they don't go through the whole process of going through the whole process and then finding out, oh, and by the way, this wording means that you really do have to
But
build.
it's not just them, right? What happens when the next group comes up and they are a little bit more concerned about this little detail, right? They're talking about a bathroom. But what about the next thing, the next thing, and the next thing? The more specific we get in here, the more it prevents us in our other ordinances and stuff, and our business licensing and everything else, to be able to address those things appropriately at that area. I feel for them, but that's not this group, I don't think. You guys all have more experience than I do.
Right.
But that's not this group to be making that decision, and
Okay.
it's gonna change, and this ordinance, or this zone won't change.
Maybe staff can answer this for me.
And it'd be awesome to have Brian here.
In the home occupation requirements, does it require access to a bathroom? No. Is there anything mentioned at all? Okay. So if we reference that, then,
Childcare, that falls under the state requirements, so the fire marshal and review, he inspects all the childcare, and I believe the state does in certain situations, depending on the number of kids.
so I'm fine with the going forward if everyone's comfortable with saying that we're fine with it really not being a requirement to have a restroom.
No, I don't feel comfortable with that.
So,
I am okay with that.
do you have anything else to say? Okay,
I like leaving it broad. But
thank you. Is there,
Just an amendment, you just said something that it doesn't say.
Right.
Right.
well, but it does not require it, so I'm,
Doesn't,
It says that everything has to be according to code.
the code. But if they choose not to build a bathroom, there is no bathroom built.
If the code says that they have to, then they have to.
But from what Mike said,
The state building code,
right.
and so that's what Bryce will need to review with this proposal. He'll need some more information about the use, about the buildings there, about access. He'll take all that into account and study the building codes and determine, hey, you gotta have something, or no, the restroom in the home counts, or, you know, you've got 2 steps going up to the back door, people can't get into there, or you need a handrail to get in the back door, or something. Like, he'll evaluate that. He'll say, you know, no, you need a handrail next to the toilet. You know, those types of things. He'll evaluate all of that.
putting in a handrail is pretty minor.
So,
Well, that's what I was gonna say, is that
Yeah.
it's very, open for us for liability of, the swing of options that we could be liable for, either a handrail or an entire bathroom. We don't know that yet, and so.
It's yet to be determined.
It's yet to be determined, so what, I don't know if I like leaving us that exposed.
so,
I mean, it's okay, I mean, I think like, I'm probably a little bit different, like
Hey,
if the
can you guys make
commission
sure you
voiced
both talk
back
in the
to
microphone?
staff, we're supportive of this, but we don't think it requires a bathroom. I mean, there's some guidance so that we can come into this with some sort of clarity that, hey, we're going through this process, I mean, it's not just about, I don't know, what, $600 or whatever to have the commission go through writing a code, and we're kind of sponsoring this, and then to find out at the end of it, we got this passed, and the commission approved it, and somebody that we haven't even spent much time with yet comes out and says, no, it's not approved.
So we've been studying this for a month, right? This was a similar discussion a month ago. Bryce is available for meetings. We do DRC meetings every Monday. staff is available to come, for you to come in, and Bryce can outline the things, the building codes. I've even emailed you guys building codes to look at. And so as staff, we're available for you to come in and meet with us through this process. So you're not waiting until the business license or conditional use permit. Come in and meet with us right now. You know, set up an appointment. It's a little hard for Bryce when he's on an inspection at the temple and trying to talk to you and do an inspection. He said, he admitted to me afterwards, I was all over the place, you know, but.
And I think we're fine doing that. Like, I'd love to come in and meet with staff. I guess it's just kind of this trepidation of it could go either way. And that's a little bit awkward for us to go through this entire process.
I feel for you
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
I feel for you on that, but I
Yeah.
mean, but the code is the code, and we have to make it fit. You know,
Well, and I hope, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I hope it works out to use your house, but like, we're not looking at it. So it's really
Yeah.
hard for us to make any recommendation on things, you know? That would be great if it works, but that's why we have people that look at it.
So a question I have would be, if the only time this comes into consideration is if and when I hold classes. So if those classes were taught on my back patio or in my home, then we would just be under the conditional use permit. Like, if we just change the location and it's just on my patio instead of in the marketplace, is that the only thing that's hanging up on this?
No. Why would that only apply to,
Is this the only time anybody would come?
you're not
To-
gonna be open to the public?
No, it's not.
Or 7 to 9?
Well, in the code it is, but Sunnyside isn't.
That
This is,
allows
In
them
this
to do that. They
ordinance
may
it
set
is.
different
I thought you
hours.
Said
Yeah.
you're gonna have
I mean,
where
we
people
also have,
can browse in the garden and stuff like that.
no, I mean, we have,
full stands and.
no, I mean,
I think we've kind of
yeah,
cut
we've
that
talked
out.
about
I
everything.
mean, our last meeting, we kind of said we wanted to write, I think we were kind of more flexible on the hours, and the commission was saying, hey, we gotta make sure this applies to anybody that would apply for a market farm, which is kind of where we landed with the,
Just being more vague and broad, so
Hours we
anybody
did.
could do
I
this?
got that.
So,
Well,
yeah, that's just my question. I guess we could absolve so much of this if I didn't hold classes at the market. Is that the only thing that's holding this whole decision up about?
In my mind, the thing that's holding it up is that a commercial use. It's hard for me to understand how a commercial use isn't gonna be open for, how are you gonna make any money if you're not open
Why are
to
we
the
here if it's
public?
not commercial?
And
well, I
then
guess
if you're
it's,
open to the
think how many
public-
farms there are in Lindon that don't have restroom facilities on them. How many farms are there in Lindon right now that don't have restroom facilities?
Farms?
Mhm.
As in,
Fruit farms, tree farms, orchards, you name it. I think I'd still drive past a couple just on 400 North there, and
Yeah, look, I see what you're saying, but like if I were to step onto that farm, I could be trespassing. Where you're opening it up to people to come onto your property, I think that distinguishes it, but.
But we're also writing this to allow the market, to allow you to do sales of different products, to do U-Pick, to do classes. I mean, it's, the definition isn't just for educational classes in the home. If it is, then we need to go back and
Yeah,
rewrite this ordinance.
I think if you just want to do educational classes in your home, that would probably fall directly under the home occupation, and you just apply for a home occupation. It's the other things, it's the putting the market stand out, it's having the U-Pick flowers, those other things, that's what opens it up much broader, that where we have to consider this. And
I
so,
think what we want to voice is just flexibility on our side. Like, we just want to know what we're required to do under different circumstances, because if somebody within the staff comes back and says, hey, for this use, you have to have a bathroom, and we say, well, what exactly is in that use? We can cut this out or that out, and now we don't have to have a bathroom, or change this or change that, we don't have to have a bathroom, then now it makes it feasible, we do that. And on the far extreme of this is, we just don't get a building permit at all, or business permit at all, and we just sell like outside of the city, right? So we grow our product on our farm, we take it outside of the city to sell it, and then I don't think there's anything required.
You'd have to have a business license in that city that you're
there's still
selling.
some
it.
things.
Sure.
I
Then that
think
takes tax
we
revenue
continue
out of
and get
Lindon.
this answered with Bryce.
so.
It's just the way this is written. It's very much you said, what if we just do it just in our home? Well, the fact is the definition of this market farm includes your home within the 2 acres. It's really difficult to parcel them off when the definition says it's all the same.
Totally, but
That
it feels like,
the market farm requires a residence on the market farm within the 2 acres.
which is why we think you ought to be able to use
Use the
the
bathroom
restroom
in the
in the
residence.
residence that it's required to be on site.
So it's,
I'm
it
with
sounds,
you on
yeah.
that personally, I just don't
Yeah.
know how to, we
Yeah.
wanna word that,
Word
that
that.
works for everybody.
Well,
So-
let's, if people are more comfortable with continuing it, let's let, our building official, let's
Then you know
let
what you're
you
getting
work with them and work with our city staff until we can come back with a definition
So,
that people
we
are
good to-
comfortable with.
Let's get back to procedure. Let's close
But
the
I-
public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
I second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing's now closed. So let's, we have a recommendation from Commissioner Call that we look at possibly continuing this again to let staff and the applicants have time to go through the process of actually seeing what this looks like with the current ordinance. Is there any more discussion by the commission about that?
I just, I would be comfortable with, going ahead, and letting staff work that out, but it appears the rest of the commission is not. And
Well, I think
so-
the applicant feels a little.
I'm with you on that, as written, let staff work it out, I'm
And-
fine
But I
with
don't
that.
think they're really
But
that.
that's
in
what
But
favor.
they're not,
But
I
I-
mean, we're not writing the ordinance for them, we're writing it for the city
So
specifically.
that's the question to the commission. Are we ready to say we're ready to recommend this to the city council? And in between that time, the applicant can work with staff so that they can voice their opinions to city council? Or do we want it to come back to us?
I think it needs to come back to us unless you feel more comfortable, but I sense that you feel like you want to go into it with all your information on the table.
And we're not going to write in a zoning code that you can't have, that you are exempt from having a bathroom. We're not going to, that's two different codes. We're going to have a zoning code that says, this is what you do and here's your parameters. That's what we do with any type of business, any type of development, then you have a building code you follow. And so that's what, interested parties will do is they'll come in and meet with the building official, the city engineer, myself, and do a development review committee and see what's required. And so,
And so-
I just want to give a heads up, we're not gonna write in a zoning code about a bathroom.
Right, so here's how I see it for the commissioners, is do we feel comfortable that if the Butlers decide not to do this, because once they go through staff, that we still want a market farm in Lindon?
I like it.
If we like it, then I would say it's probably time just to send it on and they can work out those details. Because I don't think the ordinance will spell out whether there's a bathroom or not, just like the home occupation doesn't. It depends on probably number of people and all those things. Because I don't think we're gonna write in the ordinance anything, and I agree that the statement that it has to meet building code does not require a bathroom. It just requires if a bathroom's built, it's gonna have to meet whatever code it's in that zone, right? It's gonna have to meet
I'm
those
not
codes.
sure it doesn't require it, I'm just saying
It
whenever it
requires it for the building license,
Yes.
not
For the
license,
building.
For the business license, right? You have to have a bathroom if you have a commercial operation, a business license. So
But, like,
it
let's-
does require it.
Like, let's say.
And that's a state or federal
Well,
type of a.
right, but that's the same thing as, the same as the home occupation though. Is that what I'm saying, is at that point, whether you have a bathroom or not is a business license issue. It's not a zone issue. And so saying that has to meet building code, well, everything has to meet building code, or else it's non-conforming in the city and we tag it and they have to tear it down or whatever, right? So I don't think that, it's the business license part, and we're not here to argue, I mean, that's not what's before us. So I guess that's my question to the commissioners. Do you want to make a motion?
My personal feeling is, I'm comfortable with approving this to be forwarded on and letting the applicant meet with staff just the way it is. But if you don't feel comfortable, and you're the ones really precipitating this zone change, and if you want to have all your facts on the table, then I'd say let's continue it. Either one of those. I would
Right,
go.
and so I guess that's the question to you. Would you rather have this continued? But with what staff has said, I don't think more specific, we're not gonna write into this ordinance whether you have to have a bathroom or not. So if that's what you're waiting for, it's probably just gonna delay it if you, because that's not gonna happen in this actual motion.
Yeah, so it feels like we got a choice here, like pass, like approve it, pass it as is, and we kind of cross our fingers that we can work with staff to get something worked out. If we don't work it out, this still will go to city council and may get passed as a new ordinance, in which case there may be an ordinance without an application,
Right,
which isn't.
for some other person that decides.
You can always go to city council and talk to them.
So I guess I don't, unless you see a reason, I don't see any harm in, from what,
Sending it
the idea, I think, is that the commission here is in favor of probably sending it on. We won't know for sure until we vote, but that's the feeling I'm getting.
I haven't heard anything from Mike. What's your thoughts on
You
it?
don't wanna hear from me.
I do. I value your opinions.
No, this is just, having sold a lot of fruit and vegetables over the years and never even attempted to get a permit to do so. I wonder if we're just complicating something that doesn't need to be all that complicated. And the restroom thing, to me, if she taught her classes on the patio or in her home, then I think that's a moot point. You know, and,
Yeah, clearly, if they just want to continue to grow flowers on their property, just have something in their home, then this entire ordinance is unnecessary.
yeah. But I have no problem with sending it on to city council and hope that they can meet with DRC. I think that's probably the missing ingredient that should have maybe happened before now, to really sit down in a DRC type format and kind of work some of these things out. And I don't know if it's, whereas Rob said, this whole thing has come about precipitated by them. Are we better off continuing it and letting them have a meeting with DRC to see
Well,
what
they can do that anyway,
They
even if
can.
we pass it
Yeah.
and they meet with DRC and then it
Yeah.
goes to city council and they can,
So really, I have no problem either way.
city council would have that information. They would have additional information that we don't have.
And city council would have,
And
city
they
coun-
would know more also.
and city council would have the opportunity of realizing there's nobody in it, they might not pass it anyway, if by that time, you know, it doesn't, just because we're passing, doesn't mean city council's gonna pass an ordinance where there's no applicants.
Well,
That'd be city council's decision whether they wanted a market farm in the city or not at that
And-
point. It's ultimately their decision, so.
and just having talked with some of them, I think they would very much like to work things out and have this type of thing.
Okay.
You know, it fits kind of with Lindon's culture. So I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
So, with that, would you like to, we ask your opinion, and then we start arguing amongst ourselves?
We'd love to follow your lead, like whatever you guys decide is best, we'll work within it either way.
Okay. Then with the commission, are we ready to?
Hey, Steve, when you had it open for public, there was a resident who sent an email. I think you passed it on to everybody. Is it worth just capturing, and I should have brought this up in the public comment, but if you would be willing to just let me read a few lines from this resident.
Lincoln, let's have you go.
Yeah, if we read into the microphone so we can all hear this.
Sorry. This is
Sorry,
out
it's
of-
been so long, I forgot. I did send that on to you.
Yeah, this is from
Come through.
David Holbrook, and he was just voicing his opinion. I'm not a hard no on this, but I would encourage the city to proceed with caution. And one of his biggest arguments was parking, wanting to make sure that there was sufficient, and he said no on-street parking. And I did read what was written about this on the parking. But then he kind of summarized and he said, cap on visitors for events or classes. Now, again, this is a resident. This is just somebody else expressing their opinion in an email. Cap on visitors, events, classes to 30, for example, 30. No street parking. Market stand well away from street, behind parking. Substantial off-street parking. I think parking is the big thing there. Anyway.
How can you say if people are just parking in front of the residents, I mean, anybody else can park in front of their residence, whether it's a business or not.
Sure.
So how can you say they
Again,
can't
this is
have
just a
parking in
resident.
front of their
He
residence?
goes on to say, if the city wants to pass this, go ahead, but not on my street, right? Which is what everybody says all the time, right? So
Yeah,
again, I'm not saying this is the way it should be. I think the parking on there says ample off-street, and if there is any on-street, then it be contained within the property. I liked what was written there, but.
Thank you.
But those
So
are-
with that-
I don't think you can compare.
And I have one more item. I put the wrong number right here. 410 is our
Park in front of their residence at any time.
violation notice and penalties section. So I need to put a new number on that, whether it's 412 or 415 or something, but I just need to update that 410 number when it goes to council as well, so that's fine.
Well, do you want me to make a motion?
If the council didn't change their opinion with that letter, I think we're either ready for, I think we're ready for a motion, whether to continue or whether to recommend approval or denial.
Okay, so as far as the motion, how do I need to change that? then?
You don't need to, I'm just making
Okay.
everybody aware that you can just use the same motion that what you recommend for ordinance 2024-6-0.
Okay. I make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 2024-6-0 as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The voting is unanimous, and that will move forward to city council. And I think you'll just work with staff when to get that on the agenda. If you want time to work some things out before it gets on the agenda, I think staff will be happy to work with you on that.
Thank you all, appreciate it.
Thank you.
It does sound like that staff is inviting you to come sit down and work that out.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is a discussion about moderate income housing incentives. And we will-
Okay, so this was a discussion we had last week at city council. And if you remember, we've adopted 5 moderate income housing strategies. You can see numbers 1 and 2 up here. One was create or allow for and reduce regulations relating to internal or detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones. We've amended our ordinance, I think like 3 or 4 times in the last 5 years to make it easier for accessory apartments. Number 2 was eliminate impact fees for accessory dwelling unit that is not an internal accessory dwelling unit, so that's for a detached. Last year, the city council removed impact fees for detached accessory dwelling units, so there's no impact fees for internal accessory dwelling units in your basement or, on the top story or detached. So, number 3 is we have these RDA areas, so we have a 700 North RDA, that's an economic area, and the Lindon Kia dealership, that's another RDA area. There's certain tax incentives you can get if you build in those areas. In those areas, we're required to set aside 10% or 5%, depending on the area, of property taxes that come into the city for affordable housing. That's already in state law. State law loosened up a little bit this year, saying we could use those funds outside the areas. In fact, we could do an interlocal agreement and work with another city if we wanted to, using those funds. We don't have a lot on that 700 North area. We have about $45,000 that we've collected in the last, since 2016, something like that, or 2018. So that's number 3. Number 4, reduce, waive, or eliminate impact fees related to moderate income housing. Last year, the council made the decision to waive or eliminate impact fees for police and fire impact fees for moderate income housing. And then number 5 is the one I want to talk about tonight. It says implement zoning incentives for moderate income units and new developments. So I kind of want to brainstorm with you a little bit. And we did this with the council. So this year, part of our strategy is during 2023, I sent some ideas to the council. And now this year, we're working on narrowing down some of those zoning incentives. And so when we're talking about zoning incentives, we're talking about height limits, setback changes, parking changes. You could do even things like inclusionary zoning that requires a certain percentage of the units to be affordable. And so as I spoke with the council last week, their recommendation was to maybe look at heights in certain areas. And then, oh shoot, I forgot my paper.
Heights relative to multifamily?
Multifamily.
We're talking densities, in other words, we're saying density.
Well, that's one. You don't have to necessarily say density, but you could say if you do, a certain percentage of a moderate income housing, we'll give you an extra 12 feet to do another story, something like that. The 2 things the council talked about. Thought I wrote them down.
I'll remember, where are they listed in here? Are they listed in this? I'll remember it if I see them.
It was listed on ideas for implementing the above strategies. Was allowable height. I think in open space, those were the 2. Reducing the amount of open space.
Oh, yeah,
I think those were the,
that's what it was.
yeah.
Reducing the amount of open space required for the developer.
So the 2 we
they're
talked to
close to the
council about the council's talked about was increase in allowable height. Let me zoom in on those. So increase in allowable height, that second one. And then reduce development open space requirement if you're within a certain distance of a common open space or a public park or public plaza. So that's something we would have to write. We'd have to amend some ordinances and things. And then the other thing I was thinking about today too was looking at maybe updating our shared parking ordinance. And so if you've got uses that you have more of a nighttime population in a multifamily development where you'd have an office use or during the day, and maybe adjusting our shared parking ordinance was one I thought could be an easy change as well, so.
Don't we already do that? I mean, it seems like we've passed quite a few things where there's shared parking.
Yeah, but what our ordinance says is that it doesn't allow you to decrease the area. You still have to provide a landscaped area in case there isn't enough parking, that landscaped area can be turned into parking. So it still requires the same acreage requirement.
What, help me remember, what does the state legislature define as moderate income?
So you take the county median income, area median income, which I think is about 80,000, 80 to 84,000, and it's 80% of that. So I think you're around 68 or something like that is your housing for that area median income. For someone that makes, or a family that makes about 68,000 a year.
But what about $68,000? I mean, what does that mean?
So that means
They have to, it's a percentage of their income.
30% of their income, including utilities and insurance, would go to housing.
30%
Yes.
of 68,000.
So, yeah, so you're looking at a monthly
Yes.
payment of under a couple $1,000s.
Yeah, I think it's probably about
1,700.
1,700, I think
And
you're
that
right.
includes utilities.
Uh-huh.
So I guess my question is with do we have any, I guess maybe the zone we just have, I can't remember what we called it now, where we have the mixed use, or, you know, is that where we would allow them to go up one more story? I mean, because we don't have a lot of zoning anywhere in the city that allows any of that anyway.
In fact, we don't have a zone that allows multifamily, except for what we've created with the Lindonville, in the Ivory Homes development, the Anderson Farms, and then our senior housing overlay. Those are our two zones that allow multifamily.
Yeah, so I just,
So what we would do is probably have like a, I was reviewing a bunch of other cities' ordinances today and their goals, and some of them wrote in their zoning codes, not applying to a specific zone, but more of a moderate income chapter in saying, if you do moderate income housing, we'll allow you to go a certain height, not saying which zone it actually has to go into. So that's something they would have to work out later on, or.
so we could we could meet this requirement without it really doing
Just by
anything.
writing it in, but not providing a zone to do it.
Yeah, which is hard. That's
Which
what a
that
couple cities have
seems-
done,
It's
but
slippery.
I'm not saying that's what we would do, but
It's a slippery slope, because you could design and make changes and make concessions, and so you can get to a moderate income housing, and then interest rates go from 7 to 9%, and you're you're in violation. So, it's a moving target.
Yeah, well, and I worry about the one with parking, because, I mean, Songbird Cove is not probably a third full, but when we walk through there, there's already multiple cars per residence that's there that are everywhere, and when that's full, that's gonna be it's gonna be a parking nightmare, just like, down at Anderson Farms where they get there. So I'm concerned about that option of thinking of parking agreements, because with Songbird Cove, I think we were aggressive in saying they needed more parking. It's not enough.
Is that what you're saying? We approve landscaping areas so that we can flip those into parking places? Have we done that before?
not that I'm aware of. But we
We
require.
should do that more.
Yeah.
Well, but you could have a grassy area that could be used as a temporary parking area for a while,
Yeah, and it's more how we define it too, like I wouldn't consider a shared parking for Songbird Cove. It would be more like a 700 North development where you've got more of a mixed use there on 700 North in a specific area like that.
Like that one that came to us where they want to do brownstones along the backside with a common parking area to the commercial businesses. That one could make sense, but
Yeah.
Is this because you have people proposing ideas, or are you just trying to open it up and make it more available?
State is required.
It's these state,
The requirements.
the
okay, I
requirements,
see what
so
you're saying.
we,
Trying to
this
choose
year,
which one.
because we adopted the requirement of, or the strategy of, this one here, implement zoning incentives for moderate income units in new developments. So that's something we need to work on this year. So what that, is it, do we decrease the open space slightly? Do we come up with an open space standard for multifamily saying, like when I was in South Salt Lake, you had to have 20% open space for a multifamily development. Do you decrease that to 15% or 10% if you're within a quarter mile of a park or some other public plaza area? Is that's something, or what, like the trail here, if you're close to a trail, the Heritage Trail or the Murdoch Trail or something.
Did you talk about strategy 3? Is that also one that you approved in the?
Strategy 3 is probably more with the council, how, it's more of a decision from the RDA and,
Okay, so that's
and
not
things.
relative to this right now.
Right. Yeah.
So, Mike, has there been any studies? I'm just curious, is there even a possibility? I mean, how dense would we have to go in Lindon to get a unit that meets that requirement?
Yeah,
Has there been, I mean, we can jump through the hoops for the state or whatever, but thinking of that payment, I just don't know how,
Well, and it's,
anywhere in Lindon, even if you put, you'd have to put,
yeah.
even the apartments that are going up, they're not
It's
gonna be
unfair.
affordable.
For example, how hard is that gonna be for Alpine to do it? And then Lindon to do it, and Monat to do it?
Right.
It's a lot easier for Monat to do it than Alpine or Lindon to do it because of the cost of land.
Even if the land were free, the
Yeah.
cost of building it,
Right.
seriously.
and that's what
very
that's what some cities are doing. Like I was reviewing Bluffdale, for example. Their goal is to have $1 million to go out and buy property. That's the same thing South Jordan's doing with their RDA funds. So some of that works when your RDAs are very successful to be able to use those funds for that.
What about the land that we're using as landfill and we're covering it over with dirt? Can we set that aside for moderate income housing?
Now let's
Hey,
try, and let's,
Spanish City did that.
They
if you
did.
recall. Yeah.
and then they
They
had
had a
to,
bunch of settling and
There's a
stuff.
lot of property.
well,
there.
and then they had to move all of the mobile homes they put
did.
there.
What
Yeah.
city was it that did a similar thing to that and then this garbage started resurfacing?
Spanish
and-
Fork.
and-
Yeah, that was
And
fun.
syringes and everything else started surfacing.
But we have a lot of land sitting out there.
Yeah,
I guess my
Is that
question,
some
what I mean, is do we have to meet these codes?
we do.
We have to show
We're
that we're making
required to,
efforts
we are
towards
mandated
those.
to have 3 goals. If we want priority funding for certain types of transportation funding, we have to have 5.
And then we have to show
It's
what,
always the gun to the head.
It feels immoral, or it doesn't feel moral, but some of this is, we're doing our best, how can we check the box and make them happy? We know it's not gonna make a difference.
Yep.
But we're doing our
When you
best.
read in, there's been 2 articles this week on the average cost of a home in Utah
Right.
today. What was it,
No.
$600,000?
yeah.
And the average cost of a home in Ohio is $120,000. And they say by 2030, I think it is, it's gonna be $1 million in Utah. Well, how are you gonna get affordable housing in your city when the prices of homes are up $1 million?
Well, I think it's sort of interesting here because we have to, even if we pass this, you may not get a developer that's even gonna come by and say, give me another story. That entire next story is gonna have to be Formica countertops and linoleum floors and, even to make it remotely come in. I think the only thing we've ever done in this city that's moderate income housing is we approved the senior complex of Avalon, is that what it is? Where the single studio apartment came in at $1,300 a month. They were saying 11 to 13. That's the only thing we've ever done, and other than that, and that's a very unique situation.
But the state has also opened up some funding for developers.
Right.
You've also got development companies that go after federal funding. There's a group called Cowboy Partners that does a ton of work in Salt Lake County, and they build some beautiful developments, and usually all of the units are affordable. And so there are developers who specialize in that. Now, they're mostly around a track station or, you know, some type of mass transit like that. But there are developers that know how to,
Multifamily housing.
yeah, they know how to go out and get that funding from the state
I
and the
guess-
federal government.
Another point is if we are going to play the game, we have to get our residents to agree to multifamily housing.
Well, that's the problem, is that any of these types of housing are gonna be your higher density multifamily housing. And the residents are so opposed to that, how do you show progress towards that?
Look at Orem, they put a moratorium.
Just should make an ordinance that says we're gonna look at it like this.
But I don't think this, all the things we've adopted necessarily aren't associated with just multifamily housing. Like,
Well,
number
impact
one-
But it's the only
fees.
way you can make it work, isn't it? Make it
we're
pencil.
making it work through ADUs. We're approving 12 ADUs a year, in Lindon, and we've reduced impact fees for those. So, you know, we've got our three goals right there through allowing ADUs, eliminating impact fees, allowing detached ADUs. Really, we're just working now on, you know, what are some other zoning incentives we could look at? Is it, you know, should we look at this open space this year?
Is that an ongoing thing, Mike? In other words, you have to have so many per year, or once you get to a certain percentage, you're there?
No, you
progress
always
on
have to
this.
be implementing it
So
with the
we're always
state.
gonna be giving away stuff.
We're always going to be working on our ordinances and,
So, is there any concern in Lindon that our ADUs are moving towards not meeting the requirement? I'm just thinking like a lot of the detached ADUs might be more than 1,700. I mean, I know a lot of 2 bedrooms that are probably getting close to, so by the time you put in utilities and everything that comes with it, that might not be a way to really meet that requirement anymore, even in Lindon.
well,
Because,
we used to make them sign an agreement that they couldn't rent it for over a certain amount,
Medium income.
the median income. But we did away with that because the state mandated ADUs everywhere, you know? And so, yeah, we used to do
just a
that.
concern in this area, because I know the rent prices are not cheap around here.
I'm not even sure how we would monitor that unless
And I don't know how
someone
the
gave
state
us a
would monitor it
report,
either, but-
unless we required a report from,
Rent controls.
you know,
But-
someone every year.
I mean, I'm fine with looking when we do these things. I don't know if adding another story is really, I mean, if we're gonna allow the high density, I don't know if another story is really that.
But as long as but then the parking requirements, and so in other words,
Right, but they're doing that, right, to get more places on a smaller place, and it always comes down to parking, and I think that's just, is one of the,
so again, you can have that in your ordinance saying that we'll allow the other story, but you're not gonna adjust or concede on
The
the parking
parking,
requirement.
which is still-
Then it's just sort of a circular thing, we're
Well,
implementing it, but we're
The
not.
reason it works in places like Salt Lake and these areas like Cowboy Partners does and whatnot, I mean, they're approving projects with 0.5 spaces per door.
because they're close to
Because they're
transit.
close to tracks, they're close to, you know, basically they're building,
Parking in the building that's enclosed, like the first floor's parking or something like that.
yeah.
So I kind of wanted you to throw out some things maybe you'd like me to look at, and I can come back in a couple weeks and we can have some further discussions about a couple of these. If the open space requirement, we could, you know,
I'm okay with
if
that.
you like that.
I'm okay with that one. Though parking's a quality of life issue.
I think the council felt the same way. I think maybe what we need to do though is make sure our parking ordinance is right. I don't have it in front of me right now, the number of stalls per unit, but that's probably something to look at as well as, do we have the right parking ratio in place? Actually, I think I can look that up real quick. I think it's over 2, if I remember right.
Be a perfect case study of that. We talked a lot about parking.
And we added
And it's not all filled in yet, so we don't exactly know how many people are gonna be parking on the street, how many issues are gonna be there.
But I would say most of them have a car on the street. Most of them have 1 or 2 cars in the driveway and a car on the street already.
I drove through it to see it.
Yeah. No,
Songbird Cove.
Songbird Cove at the end of my street, the new townhomes, where they're building the new bank off State Street, where the horse property used to be.
I don't wanna concede on parking, I just think it makes it a mess.
But I also look at my neighborhood.
Parking on that development.
Everybody parks on the street in my neighborhood. I mean, look at my family, we got 4 cars. You know, the neighbor next to me, they've got 6 cars. Everybody parks on the street. I
Well-
mean,
Probably have wider streets.
But that's my
Point.
concern here,
That
though,
actually
is
makes
that,
the point.
is that most people only have room for 1 car on the street if they don't have a fire hydrant, or if, I mean, in Songbird Cove, they're parking on the street, but that's gonna spill over into the other neighborhoods really quickly.
I mean, my neighbor spills over to my house, so I mean,
Well,
it-
and that's
I
one
totally
reason
agree.
when they
That's the
were
point. We
talking
wanna
about
reduce parking.
even this little market thing, you know, when they were saying, well, you can't have parking on the street. And I'm going, how do you say that you can't park in front of your residence?
yeah.
How can you do that?
Yeah, that is.
So,
kinda rubs me up.
couple things,
Basically gas appliances.
look at, look at open space. Is there anything else on this list that you'd wanna look at? Do you wanna look at any type of zoning incentive or anything like that?
How would that work?
Like I read Santa Quinn's ordinance today, and they give a 6%, if you do 6% of the units, let's see, if 6% of the units are moderate income, you get a 6% density increase, is the way they do it.
Well, that's
Um,
an interesting concept.
Yeah,
I've seen cities where they say, okay, curb and sidewalk on one side only. That cuts quite a bit of cost down.
uh-huh,
And, you know, you still have a sidewalk and it's the community to use.
yeah.
I kind of like that better than I do giveaways.
But Rob, everything we do like that to try and bring costs down, as you're talking about it, somebody in Washington DC is doing something stupider that's bringing the cost up twice of what we just saved. By trying to outlaw gas appliances, so now water heaters are 3 times what they were 3 years ago.
See, I told you I liked your opinions.
I'm in a bad mood tonight, I need to just stay
It's
shut
just-
up.
It's like the only way to guarantee moderate income housing is for the city to own it and rent control it, and we don't want that. Other than that, time moves on,
Well, I think
interest rates move on, you know, and what we call moderate income housing today, next year is not gonna be moderate
personally,
income
I
housing.
think it's wrong for legislators to say every city has to have it.
Absolutely.
So one thing that came up in the city council toward the end, and I didn't even connect with it until Van brought it up, and by then the city council was ending, is number 3, scroll up to that one, Mike. Where it talks about you can take monies from your CDAs and RDAs, and given new legislation, you can actually give that to another city.
Right.
Now, why would we want to do that? Well, Van said, well, and he said this just to me talking, he said, well, I'd love to take a bunch of money and then give it to Provo to build some high-density housing. Oh, that's a good idea. Right? So maybe we can make
Well,
a
you know,
difference.
think about it, really. Those places that already have high-density housing have already got fire departments with ladder trucks and all the crap we don't need to get into, if we can do just that.
Yeah.
Oh, you
Yeah,
can,
and that's part of this ordinance.
like, we don't have, right now, our $45,000, I don't know if it'd make a difference,
No.
but I'm happy to reach out to Provo and other cities
Well,
and say,
it makes more sense in small communities where the land costs are lower.
But it sounds to me like we want to give it to Mona. Wasn't Mona?
Right,
the-
Mona, Santa Quinn, Nephi.
You know, I've always been an opponent of, you know, of workforce housing. If we have to have moderate income housing, we're forcing it down, let's do it as workforce housing, so our employees can live in the city. You know, something like that. It's just really hard.
But, you know, as far as this ordinance, when it talks about the 5% set aside for housing preservation, that's for 700 North, and then the 10%, you know, for the community reinvestment area, the Lindon Park. That was one of my questions is, how have we done that? I mean, we haven't provided 10% and 5% to, I mean, the 10% to any other cities, or we haven't done the 5%, have we?
I mean, we have very, you know, kind of young RDA areas, so.
Right.
So we won't be, we don't have much development in them. We will, once we start getting some new development on 700 North,
Can do that.
then the property taxes will increase, we'll get, you know, more money down there, but.
So is there any way on this just to show that we're, you know, trying to make progress on this?
Yeah.
I mean, I noticed in here you're saying that a majority of it hasn't been developed yet. But we haven't, I mean, we really, other than set the goal, we really haven't done anything on that yet.
No, so what I'm just looking at tonight is just, what can we do, how do you feel about any zoning incentives we could start bringing back to you and to talk about as just to brainstorm?
Well, all the ones you mentioned, I'm not opposed to looking at except parking.
Yeah, that's fine. So,
There's something that rubs me wrong about one person having to pay an impact fee and his neighbor doesn't.
Yeah, we just mentioned that down here. I think impact fees in, but that train's left the station. But I think eliminating impact fees could come and bite us down the road when it comes to keeping police and fire and our community services running the way they are.
False
But
economy.
it's
not real.
But once again, it's not our fault. It's the legislator's fault. This is being pushed on us.
and
Cross your heart, Rob, for thinking things are fair.
So this is a website that, as part of the funding for moderate income housing, the state legislature gave the Gardner Institute money to pull out, to evaluate every city's housing gap. And I'm still trying to study this, so I haven't sent it out to everybody yet. But, you know, for example, like to Rob's point, you know, there weren't any homes, 100% of the homes in Lindon sold in 2022 were over the 80% AMI. You know, we didn't need this to tell us that information, but, you know, there's other things in here. Going back to our previous discussion, 80% AMI, the rent needs to be $1,920 or less a month. Those are our target.
Does it matter how many rooms?
Nope.
'Cause I mean, you can get one bedrooms that are.
They all get blended together, it's basically an average.
So building types by renters, this is mostly focused on renting, those who are renting, but, you know, 40% of our renters live in single-family homes. Yep, because all of our housing is almost single-family homes here. 18% live in townhomes. You can see here.
And
I don't know.
that is specific to Lindon, isn't it?
Yeah, this is all specific to Lindon. You can click on every city here. And I want to look at this a little more, and I'll send this link out to everybody. But I think this is what the legislature's looking at. You know, they're saying we have a deficit of 115 units at 30% AMI. We have a deficit of, you know, we have an increase, which I don't get. We have a surplus of 19 rental units at an 80% AMI. But I don't know where they're getting this information because we don't have 19 units that I'm aware of. So that's why I haven't sent this out, because I wanted to call the Gardner Institute and talk about this a little bit more. But
Are they pulling off a census?
yes, yeah.
So I know that you talked quite a bit about, you know, efforts made to actually report ADUs that are in the city, which we all know there's a number of those that aren't reported.
Yeah.
So what efforts are being made to get people to report those?
Yes, so the council at the last last city council meeting adopted a new program, and we brought to you this about a year ago, probably,
Probably. Yeah.
about legalizing units that are existing. So we have a self-checklist that people will go through. They'll apply for a building permit. The inspector will go out and do an inspection, and mainly looking at life safety issues.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that,
We have a fair amount of people that have,
so we just adopted that last week, but we've had 2 people this year come in and just say, I want to make mine legal.
yeah.
So,
that's great.
and I don't think they really had to upgrade anything. I think there were some things they had to move away from the hot water heater and stuff, and I think they had to change out a GFCI outlet, but I think that was about it. It was very minimal. Because the state also has said that you no longer have to have 2 furnaces. You can use the same ductwork for your furnaces and things. So they've made it easier as well.
Well, the same people that would come in and request that are also the same people that would probably have their apartments in pretty good shape.
Yeah, yep.
You know, that's,
So, okay, well, I'm gonna work on some open space things. I'll maybe bring a couple other items back to you for some future discussion, and so,
yeah, this is really hard to see how to move this forward, isn't it?
yeah.
And to
And maybe
show
next year,
progress.
yeah, maybe next year we need to look at those 24 goals and see if there's something else we wanna switch out. We wanna switch out one of these for one of those other 24.
Maybe on some that we just haven't been able to move forward on.
Yeah. So I think we can come up with a zoning incentive that, you know, that will accomplish that. So,
Okay. Well, appreciate all your work on it. My goodness, this isn't easy.
I have a report due August 1st, and I'm gone a lot of July, and so I'm trying to get some things moving here, so.
So where are you going?
I'm taking my second youngest daughter to Las Vegas for a couple days to go see Caitlin Clark play basketball. We're gonna drive down, and then with my oldest 2, I've got a neighbor that lives in Alaska in the summer, so we're gonna go stay with him for a week, so.
Awesome.
so.
It's great.
Okay,
Good.
are we done with that item then, and we're ready to move on to the planning director and commissioner reports?
Right now, I don't have anything for the next planning commission meeting unless we come back and talk about a couple of these affordable housing items. So we'll see. I'll get back to you whether we have our next meeting or not.
Okay. And also on this market thing, will that come before?
It'll have to go.
With recommendations or changes or that type of thing, or whatever they worked out and already, you know,
So I'd have to have it ready for council tomorrow, because council's packet will go out Thursday morning, so I have to have it to Adam by tomorrow, and so I don't think they're gonna be on the next council meeting.
Okay, so then it wouldn't come to us either. Okay. Yeah, just some of my thoughts on that, you know, now that we're, I wish there was a way that it could be worked out so they could succeed. I think this type of thing goes very much along with the culture of what people would like to see in Lindon.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my thoughts on it, is without being so financial prohibitive,
And
that it won't work for anyone.
we want them to be successful as well, but
Yeah.
you've seen this for the last month or so. I've been working with them for the last 6 or 7 months. I've invited them multiple times to come talked to Bryce and trying to get them in to get these things worked out before it comes to you guys, like with the restroom or ADA stuff. I've sent them, 2 months ago, I sent them ADA stuff and bathroom things and said, come meet with Bryce. And so, you know, this has been in the works for a while.
Right.
Did somebody complain about what they were doing, or did the city notice what they were doing, and that's why this came forth, or were they just being proactive?
No, they held a big event last summer. We asked them to get a special event permit. They told us to get lost. They told the chief to get lost. And we basically have told them that, hey, you gotta get a business license to do this, so.
You know, unfortunately, if their business model is such that they can't make any money, if you can't make any money and have a bathroom, I mean, they have the wrong business model. They need to revamp their business model so that they can make some money and afford
Yeah.
something. I mean,
You can tell she's passionate about.
oh, very much, very much passionate.
Nobody's told them that farming's just supposed to be the most legitimate tax write-off there is out there.
She's, you know,
You're not expected to make money.
she's trying to turn the hobby into a business, and more power to her. I mean, that's.
I don't know if she is or not. I think she's trying to share her passion.
Yes.
Other people might. You know,
Yes.
they take advantage of this commercial farm, or this farm zone, but market farm zone.
I see it as, and I know she sells a lot of, I mean, I'm not personal friends or anything, but I know she sells a lot of her flowers to outside flower markets too.
Right, but that
You
doesn't-
know, but I think she's just trying to
Bring the
take
community
something she
together.
really loves
Yeah,
and
agreed.
be able to share it with others.
And her vision is consistent with Lindon's values. It's just,
No question, but, you know, you gotta meet certain standards.
I
It's
agree.
it's the
agree.
bureaucracy that we live in, and
I agree.
that's kills business. It kills the incentive to do business. It kills the entrepreneurial spirit.
it killed lemonade stands for a while until the state corrected that.
Yeah, innovation. It kills all that. It kills it.
Well, we're not trying to kill
I know.
this,
I'm
so
just-
don't,
I'm
no,
not
that's
saying
not our goal.
Linden City is doing that. I'm just saying, you try to open a business, that'll take somebody from a liberal to a conservative real quick. Is when they try to go through that process of starting a business and running a business.
Steve, you need to show them how to accelerate their depreciation and do some things.
That's true, actually.
That's not gonna be enough to build a bathroom.
That's right, so they can round it off.
that's okay if they wanna get a special event permit and go through that.
Porta potty or something.
Yeah, but, I mean, they had kids out in the street trying to direct traffic, and that would have been all set up with a special event permit if they would go through that with the
Yeah,
chief.
I did see that. So,
Okay, anything else?
I just have one question. There's this property I've been curious about. It's over right here. I think it was under contract now. There's the 3 or 4 acres right here on the corner of, what is it, Center and State, but on the west side of.
Is it,
By the fruit stand?
Yeah, I'm surprised that we haven't had any discussions in here. Maybe you're having some discussions with the current buyer, because I think it's under contract, or.
yes, I believe Jeremy Ackley has that under contract.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I talked to him last week, said he has no intention of doing anything. He wanted to protect what he has just south of there. So, cause he's got,
Butts up to it from the south. Jeremy's the one we did the double facing lot
right
changes
here.
for.
So he lives here, he lives here, and then he's got another property here. I think he's just trying to protect his neighborhood there, and so there was quite a few people that were after it. It's still zoned residential, and so.
Is the front 500 not commercial?
No, because it's a split zoning. Half of it's zoned residential, half zoned commercial, And the zoning ordinance says whichever is the most restrictive zoning takes precedence.
Okay, so that's why it's,
Yep.
yeah.
So,
It's an expensive buffer.
He's probably just gonna let Carlos just keep farming it and.
there was a national daycare that was trying to go after it too. I don't know what happened with them. They called quite a few times to try and get it, so.
You know, it gets kind of tough on that particular street because of the narrowness
Yep.
to do anything too intense there. It's such a narrow street, and you've got power poles that really make it hard to change the width of that
That'd be
street.
expensive.
Hey, I have a question. You know, Main Street comes and hits Center Street, and then there's that little extension of Main Street that goes out past the car lot.
Right here, yep.
I mean, I use that. Sometimes I can't even get through there because the car lot's got so many trucks parked on it. I mean, they just sort of think it's part of their lot.
Yeah.
Is there any thought there of telling them they can't use it?
Well, probably because we've kicked them out of the community center from dropping cars off
Oh.
over there, so. No, I know.
Some days you can't drive through there because they double and triple parked.
Yeah, I know we're going to be reaching out to all the dealerships because some of them will park right in the center turn lane on State Street too and start dropping cars off. So we have been asked to reach out to all the car dealerships and educate them about using the public street.
Any movement, or have you been contacted regarding the south side of 700 that's under contract? They had 6 months to get something to us. Have they done anything with it?
We met with them, was it last week? It was either last week or the week before. They're struggling to get some retail, just like the previous retailers down there, but they're working on it.
Okay.
My only question, Mike, is last time you said you were gonna possibly reach out to the developers of Songbird Cove and see if they were doing anything as far as owner occupied. I don't know if you'd have a chance to talk to them about that.
No, I haven't. As far as selling, making sure those are sold.
Making sure that, yeah, I think that in there, you were gonna see if it was in their HOA and
Let me look at that
and
again.
whether that was being talked about or enforced at all. I'd just like to be able to report back to those who've asked, whether that's. Okay, is there anything else that the commission needs to bring up?
I move we adjourn.
I won't mention the roads.
We've done that before.
house.
Okay, I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
I thought they were gonna start asphalting Main Street until they dug up a new drain